Alright, so I am back again about my research that I've been doing on the Underground Railroad. And today I'm going to talk about more about John Hunter, who is the little boy that George Stewart and his wife Jane took in while they were on the Underground Railroad. So James Stewart was a very prominent member of the Presbyterian Church here in Bloomingburg, Ohio, and he was such an interesting person. But one day they opened the door and there was a group of men, and one of them had a baby in his arms, and there was no way that baby was going to make it to Canada. And Jane Stewart, she said, that baby's staying with me because I need to make sure this baby lives. Such hard times. The war was going on. It was in the 52, so it would have been in 56. No, 58 or 59 is when this happened. And 1858 or 1859. That is, so he said he was around 4 to, some accounts say he was 4, some say he was 6. His account says he was 6. I'm going to go with that. They said he looked to be about 4. He was probably just small. So he was from West Virginia. This is some of the information that I have now. So he's from West Virginia. And then, well, at the time it was Vicksburg, Virginia, which, try Googling that. It doesn't show up. But it's Mercer County. So he came up here. His father was escaping on the Underground Railroad. And I don't know where his mom was. But but his father, he was a farmer. So he worked the fields. And then he went to, he stayed there for 10 years. And then he moved to Oberlin College. And he was the only black person in his class who was also at the top of his class, which really made the argument that the Stewarts were trying to prove, which was that they were intellectual equals. Black people were perfectly capable, even back then, of being, intellectual equals. Even someone born into slavery was equally. He was able to be an equal. And that is something that they really stressed to him. So he was raised around, around the fields. He worked, the thing about them is their daughter was also 6. And she went to school with him. Her name was Carrie. They had a bunch of children right around the same age. So I think it's very interesting that they took him in so willingly. And it shows the Presbyterian mindset versus the Quaker mindset, because the Presbyterians did not have an issue cohabitating. He ended up marrying a white woman named Mary Bush. I'm still trying to research her, but I think she might be from here. Because I'm looking into her, and she's either from Indiana, which we have Bush Road, and Bush family was one of our founding members, but he married a white woman. He delivered his own baby, and I'm not sure why he delivered his own baby, but he did. He signed his own, she had 4 babies with her, and then he was married 3 times over the course of his life, but this baby, he delivered himself. You think you're the coolest person on the block, and John E. Hunter shows up. He went to Tallahassee, and because he heard there was nowhere for black physicians to learn. And he said, can't have that. I will be going to the Jim Crow South. Not just because he was already well established. He was already well respected. He had a whole network of family and friends that he could have come home to Cincinnati in, and had, far more respect and dignity given to him and his profession. But he was a surgeon. And he operated on a bowel resection. He did the first bowel resection. Kind of cool. And then in Tallahassee, he went down and started a clinic, which was in 1929, him and 2 other physicians. Basically, the thing that impresses me about the history of Ohio is that they did not sit by and wait for someone else to fix it. We grew up in a hard Scrabble town, and it was a forest. It was, there was a lot of intermarrying among people, which was whatever. It was unique for the time, I guess. But then there were some that were still, we had, for instance, we had the first Black Brethren minister, which I'll have to do that one later, from Bookwalter. And he was told when he got baptized, Brother Bookwalter said, okay, now go find your own people. Make them, preach to them, convert them, because it's not appropriate for you to preach to white people. No. So that was one side of our town. So that was one line coming through our town. The Presbyterian line was, took a different approach. Those were the Scotch Irish. They went through and you find articles where they were arguing that they wanted this man to teach their children at a school, and they said no, absolutely not. The Quakers and some of the other groups, and Democrats and Quakers and those groups, they were very upset. They did not want their children taught, even if he was light-skinned. They didn't want him taught by a black man. And now the Presbyterians wanted the best person, and to them, he was a giant of intellect, is what they called him. So when you think about the past, it is the worst, but it's also pretty cool to see the people who bucked the system and rewrote the system. And around here, one of the issues we face is that this history is going away, because you have the people who were so devoted to it that they moved across the country. Basically started a new country because they were upset with the way that the Constitution went. And they weren't going to wait for the government to catch up. They wanted their people free. And they said, the idea of them being on American soil and in slavery is repugnant, and they would not do it. The Quakers took the approach that they wanted to do gradual emancipation, if at all. It took until, later on, they were like, sure. Well, so they wouldn't allow slave owners to be baptized in the church, but they didn't disfellowship over it yet. That came later. But they thought that it would be like an approach was better to do it like a gradual emancipation. And the Presbyterians said, not one more day. Absolutely not. We absolutely will not be. Now, what's interesting is the Presbyterians were a part of the Whig Party. The Whig Party wanted to use the sale of public lands, which was like, the Northwest Territory, selling off that land, use that to free the slaves, pay the owners. Then the owners would not get on board, and they would not allow it, so they wanted to use the sale of public land in other areas to free them, and they wanted to put that in the Constitution, and then they could fix it, and they wouldn't need the Massachusetts Compromise, which was where they had to take out all the information about black people not being proper to have black slaves. So they were like, well, we want this, but because they wouldn't do it, and then it went down the road, and they decided to buy public lands. And then they gave grants to public lands to other people, the United States did. But they wanted to use a specific part, or say like you were going to go over here and sell a park or rent it out, or oil or resources, coal or, iron, things like that were going to be used. We would take that, sell it, and take those resources and divide it up among the public. Because it's the public's land. It's not the king's land. We don't have kings here. Well, they didn't like that. So they were going to first use it to free the slaves, to compensate them for the fact that they were losing their workers, and to help them kind of modernize so they wouldn't need the slaves. And they said, no, we don't want that. So they said, you know what, forget you. And then they formed the Republican Party. And they said, we're gonna go over here, and we're going to take your slaves, whether you like it or not. They didn't like it, had the Civil War, and then they relinquished. And then the Democrats pretended they didn't do that. But yeah, that's where the Republican Party came from.